Have you ever uh, stopped to analyze the things you do every single day?
You mean the really mundane chores?
Yeah, exactly. The stuff you just zone out for, like your morning routine where you wake up, brew the coffee, and, take the dog for a walk.
Right, the stuff that feels like just another mandatory item on the eternal to-do list.
Exactly. But what if, and this is what we're getting into today, what if that simple everyday routine of walking a dog might actually be a hidden life hack?
Oh, I love that framing.
Like a remarkably efficient tool for your physical health, your mental clarity, and even for repairing the social fabric of your community.
It really is a phenomenon hiding in plain sight. I mean, we are so culturally conditioned to look at taking the dog out as an obligation.
Oh, chore.
Right, a purely functional task you just have to check off the list before you can start your real day. But today, we are going to look at this not just as a physical activity, but as a literal masterclass in psychology, socialization, and cognitive health.
Both for the human and the animal. And that is the exact mission of our deep dive today. We're pulling our insights from a really detailed transcript from a show called Paws and Paths.
Great source material.
It really is. The goal here for you listening is to unpack the hidden mechanics within a simple 30-minute dog walk. We want to extract the underlying science and the sociology of how this shared routine fundamentally alters our lives.
Because as busy learners, we all love a good life hack.
Oh, absolutely. As someone who is constantly looking for ways to optimize time, discovering that a mandatory chore is already doing heavy lifting for your well-being is a pretty compelling concept to explore.
It represents the ultimate behavioral efficiency. But it's an efficiency that, ironically, forces you to slow down.
Which is a fascinating paradox.
It really is. We are going to explore how those 30 minutes create a ripple effect, altering everything from your baseline cortisol levels to the actual macro-level social dynamics of your neighborhood.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with the concept of the habit stack, particularly on the physical and mental fronts.
Yeah, habit stacking is a great place to start.
In behavioral psychology, habit stacking is when you pair a new or desired habit with a current habit you already do daily.
Like doing squats while you brush your teeth.
Right, exactly. But with a dog, the stack is essentially forced upon you. The dog has to go outside.
They're going to make sure you know it, too.
Oh, yeah. You don't have the luxury of skipping it. Because of that obligation, you are locked into a low-pressure, incredibly consistent exercise routine.
And the data on how that required movement accumulates over time is honestly striking. The source material points out that, on average, dog owners walk an extra 3,000 steps a day compared to non-owners.
3,000 extra steps every day.
Every single day. When you do the math, that translates to roughly 1.5 kilometers of extra movement, rain or shine.
And that's just the baseline.
Right, that is the bare minimum of taking them outside to handle their business.
And anyone who has ever walked an energetic dog knows it is rarely just a casual, steady-state stroll.
Oh.
You might think you're just walking around the block, but then your dog spots a pigeon or a really interesting rapper blowing across the street.
And suddenly you're doing accidental, high-intensity interval training.
Just to maintain control of the leash. Or you factor in the mechanics of a trip to the park. The constant bending over, the throwing, pivoting to play fetch. It's a hidden workout.
It acts as functional fitness in its purest form.
Because you might skip the gym because you're tired, but the dog's needs override your own inertia.
Exactly. It aids in maintaining mobility, joint health, and cardiovascular baseline health precisely because of that inescapable consistency.
But there's more to it than just the physical side.
Much more. Where this routine elevates from a physical benefit to a profound psychological one is the mind-body connection. There is a specific therapeutic rhythm to a dog walk.
The pace of it.
Right. It operates on a consistent, almost metronomic pattern. Step, sniff, step, pause.
I always notice I feel significantly calmer after coming back inside, even if I was dreading the walk initially.
That's a very common experience.
The source material actually references a study from the University of British Columbia that quantified this exact feeling. They measured stress levels and daily mood stability, and they found that regular dog walkers score significantly better on both fronts.
It's incredible data.
But I'm curious about the actual neurological mechanics of that mental reset. Why does a simple walk around the block physically lower stress?
It comes down to interrupting the brain's default mode network.
Okay, explain that.
Think about your average daily cognitive state. You are likely caught in a mental loop of anxious rumination, worrying about work deadlines, anticipating digital notifications.
Stressing over a conversation you had yesterday.
Exactly. A dog walk forcibly disrupts that loop. When your dog stops to investigate a patch of grass, it pulls you into the present moment through sensory engagement.
So it grounds you.
You're doing a localized 30-minute exposure therapy to mindfulness. You are forced to notice the sunlight, the temperature of the air, the sound of the environment.
Because you're watching the dog do it?
Yes, you are observing a creature that is entirely 100% engaged with the physical world right in front of them. That observation shifts your brain away from internal anxiety and anchors it to external reality.
Which actively drops your cortisol production.
Precisely. It is a daily sensory grounding exercise. You are getting the neurochemical benefits of meditation without having to sit cross-legged in a silent room.
It's essentially mindfulness with fur.
I love that. Mindfulness with fur.
You have to sync your physical pace to theirs, which acts as a governor on your own racing thoughts.
It's brilliant.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though.
How?
I understand the physical and the internal mental benefits, but the source dives heavily into the sociological benefits for humans.
The social side is huge.
A dog is framed as the ultimate social icebreaker. The theory is that if you're walking alone, people generally ignore you. But a dog lowers the social barriers between strangers.
They absolutely do.
But let's introduce some friction here. We're painting a very rosy picture. What if you live in a dense, extremely noisy city, or you're just naturally introverted?
That's a fair point.
Does this icebreaker effect still hold up, or does the dog just become another layer of cognitive load in a crowded space?
It is a valid caveat, and the environment certainly plays a role. Navigating a reactive dog through a crowded urban center can absolutely be stressful.
Right.
However, sociologically speaking, the dog still acts as a crucial social buffer, even for introverts or in dense cities. Think about it. When two humans make eye contact on a sidewalk, there is immediate social friction.
Oh, yeah. Do we nod? Do we say hello? Do we look away?
Exactly. A dog diffuses that friction entirely. It provides immediate, neutral, common ground. The focus shifts from the awkwardness of human-to-human interaction to the shared observation of the animal.
It completely lowers the stakes of engagement.
It takes the pressure off.
It makes perfect sense. The pressure's off you, and onto the Labrador wagging its tail.
And people love talking about dogs.
They really do. The source points out that dog owners are statistically much more likely to know their neighbors than people without pets.
It's a proven metric.
It usually starts with something trivial, like complimenting the dog's collar or asking their breed. And over a few weeks, that evolves into chatting about the neighborhood, local politics, or mutual acquaintances.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the sociological implications of these micro-interactions are massive. We are currently navigating an era of unprecedented modern isolation.
It's so true.
It is entirely common for adults to live in an apartment building for 5 years and never learn the name of the person living across the hall.
Which is wild when you think about it.
But these small moments of small talk, facilitated by a dog, what sociologists call weak ties, add a vital layer of social warmth to a person's day.
Social warmth. That is a great way to describe it.
It's a very specific feeling.
It's not the intense heat of a close friendship, but it keeps you from freezing in an anonymous city.
Exactly the right metaphor. They might seem like trivial conversations, but they accumulate. Over time, these brief chats reduce urban alienation.
They build a network.
They create a profound sense of belonging to a neighborhood tribe. You start recognizing the regulars at the park, you learn the rhythms of your street,
They feel seen.
you feel tethered to the geography around you, which is one of the most effective, naturally occurring antidotes to adult loneliness we have.
It is fascinating that we are building this neighborhood tribe almost accidentally.
While we're just trying to get the dog to go to the bathroom.
Right. And while we are doing that, the dogs are building their own parallel society. This brings us to the canine perspective, which is just as nuanced as ours.
They have a whole world going on.
They really do. Dogs are pack animals, and the source frames these daily walks as a moving dog communication school.
It is a highly active cognitive environment for them. Humans rely heavily on visual and verbal data, so it's easy for us to assume a dog is just aimlessly sniffing a fire hydrant.
When really they're reading the morning news.
Exactly. They are downloading vast amounts of social data. They are reading the chemical markers left by other animals. They are learning how to share space, how to modulate their own excitement levels.
And they are expertly analyzing the micro-expressions and body language of the other dogs they encounter.
Which means the owner gets a front row seat to learn those subtle cues as well.
You start to realize that a wagging tail doesn't always mean a happy dog.
That's a huge misconception.
The source detailed how to read these postures. Like, if a dog's tail is held stiff and high, it might indicate hyperarousal or dominance.
But if the posture is loose and wiggly, that is an invitation to play.
Right. And then there's a tucked tail or averted eyes.
What they call whale eye.
Whale eye, yeah. That means the dog is overwhelmed and needs an exit strategy. Learning this language deepens the trust between the human and the dog, because the dog realizes you're listening to their boundaries.
What's fascinating here is the long-term impact this active engagement has on the animal's brain architecture.
It changes their brain.
It does. The source highlights a crucial veterinary insight. Socially engaged dogs maintain significantly better cognitive health as they age.
Wow.
This constant socialization interpreting complex pheromones, reading another dog's posture, navigating the unspoken rules of play promotes neuroplasticity.
So it's essentially a highly sophisticated crossword puzzle for their brain, just disguised as physical recreation.
That's a great way to put it. It actively wards off cognitive decline.
It burns mental energy, which explains why a dog can come back from a relatively short, sniff-heavy walk and immediately fall asleep.
Yes, processing that much social information demands a high cognitive load. And when a dog regularly exercises that part of their brain, it leads to lower baseline anxiety and significantly better behavioral regulation at home.
The walk is their emotional learning time.
Precisely.
And the source provides some brilliant, tangible narratives to illustrate this neuroplasticity in action. There is a story about a bulldog named Bruno that perfectly captures the power of this routine.
Oh, the Bruno story is fantastic.
Yeah. Bruno was apparently the terror of his street. He was highly reactive, pulling on the leash and barking aggressively at every single dog he saw. His baseline anxiety was through the roof.
Just a very stressed animal.
But his owners committed to walking him on the exact same route at the exact same time every day.
They essentially initiated a structured exposure therapy protocol without even realizing it.
Right. And eventually on this route, Bruno kept encountering a beagle named Daisy.
And Daisy was very calm.
Very calm, very non-reactive. Because of the consistent exposure in a controlled environment, Bruno's panic response began to thaw. The barking stopped.
Then they progressed to sitting on opposite sides of the path.
A few weeks later, they were walking side by side. The story ends with Bruno and Daisy becoming inseparable best friends, completely rewiring Bruno's social behavior.
It demonstrates the immense power of low-pressure, consistent proximity. It mirrors the exact mechanics of how young children develop playground friendships.
Just playing in the sandbox.
Right. They don't network. They simply share a sandbox until familiarity breeds comfort, and comfort breeds affection.
We see that same dynamic in another story from a listener of the Source Show, a guy named Ben. His golden retriever, Max, has been meeting his best buddy, a dog named Toby, at the local park every single evening for 3 years.
3 years of a standing appointment.
If one of them is late, the other sits by the gate and waits. It is a genuine long-term friendship.
Those narratives are incredible, and for you listening, they offer a highly practical roadmap.
Let's get into the actionable tips.
If you want to foster these kinds of connections, whether to socialize a new puppy or to build your own local network, there are specific actionable strategies you can implement based on this data.
Step 1.
First, the environment dictates the outcome. You want to intentionally choose locations with off-leash zones or wide, dog-friendly trails where natural, unforced interaction is physically possible.
Because you cannot build a connection if you're dragging your dog down a narrow, crowded sidewalk where everyone is stressed.
Exactly. You have to set the stage for success.
What's next?
Second, you must become fluent in the body language we discussed earlier. You have to ensure both dogs are actually consenting to the interaction. A stiff posture means it is time to recall your dog and give them space.
Right.
Furthermore, you have to respect the boundaries of other owners. Just because your dog is friendly does not mean the approaching dog isn't recovering from surgery, dealing with reactivity, or in the middle of a strict obedience training session.
Oh, that's a really good point. The source mentioned yellow ribbons, right?
Yes, many owners use visual cues, like a yellow ribbon on the leash, to signal that their dog needs space.
Respecting those boundaries is how you build a good reputation in the neighborhood tribe. But the real linchpin strategy for making these connections happen, the real aha takeaway from the source, is the timing.
The timing is everything.
You have to walk at consistent times.
It is the playground friendship dynamic applied to adults. If you go out at exactly 5:30 every evening, you are guaranteed to encounter the same rotation of regulars.
You keep showing up.
You keep exchanging that low-stakes social warmth, and eventually the familiarity strips away the awkwardness.
And once that baseline comfort is established,
Mm.
you can organize short play dates in neutral, safe spaces. That is where a casual street greeting evolves into a lasting bond.
Dogs have incredible memories for faces, smells, and play styles.
By facilitating those consistent interactions, you are curating a long-term social life for them.
It's a huge responsibility, but a rewarding one.
So, what does this all mean? When we zoom out and synthesize all these disparate elements, the physical habit stacking, the neuroscience of stress reduction, the neighborhood tribe, the complex canine communication school, it all circles back to one foundational concept: the bond.
The bond between the human and the dog.
It is about the shared ritual of stepping out into the world together. The source highlighted a subtle, beautiful moment that perfectly encapsulates this: the mid-walk check-in.
Ah, love the check-in.
Is that moment when you're walking
Mhm.
and your dog naturally breaks their focus on the environment just to glance up at you. Right.
That glance is a profound moment of nonverbal communication. It signifies that despite all the overwhelming sensory input of the outside world, you are their anchor.
It is pure trust and teamwork in motion.
That daily anchor builds massive emotional security for the animal. They thrive on the predictability of the routine.
But it also builds an incredible partnership between you and the pet. You are essentially resetting your nervous systems together.
And while you are cultivating that bond with your dog, you are also reaping a whole host of unexpected secondary perks as a human.
Like what?
Well, the source points out that these walks force you to become an active explorer in your own geography.
Oh, that's very true. You transition from being a passive resident who just drives from point A to point B to an active observer of your environment.
Completely. You end up being tugged down an alleyway or a side street by a curious dog, and suddenly you discover a hidden architectural detail you never noticed.
Or a quiet little pocket park right in your own zip code. You see your environment at 3 miles an hour rather than 40 miles an hour through a windshield.
Beyond the exploration, there are hidden physiological bonuses that compound over time.
The vitamin D.
Exactly. You are securing daily, consistent exposure to natural sunlight, which regulates your circadian rhythms and provides vital vitamin D.
And the evening physical exertion physically prepares your body for deeper, more restorative sleep.
And let's not forget the mental clarity. Many creatives report that simply stepping away from their screens and allowing their minds to wander outdoors provides a sudden spark of problem-solving clarity.
The source featured a quote from a listener named Sophie from Melbourne that perfectly articulates this. She wrote, "My dog's walk is my therapy. I solve half my problems before I even get home."
That is so relatable.
I think anyone who incorporates walking into their routine can relate to that mental untangling. And on top of all that cognitive problem solving, you get a front row seat to your dog's pure, unadulterated joy.
There's nothing like it.
Watching an animal become completely thrilled by the simple act of being outside instantly lifts your own mood. It is incredibly difficult to sustain a bad mood when your dog is vibrating with happiness over a stick.
It is a direct transfer of positive affect. It injects a daily dose of undeniable quality into your life.
It really does. So, to synthesize this entire journey for you listening, a dog walk is so far removed from being just a mundane chore.
It is a vital, life-enhancing anchor.
It is a natural habit stack that effortlessly merges physical movement, neurochemical stress relief, and genuine community building into one single 30-minute block of time.
Whether you share your life with a dog right now, or you are just someone who appreciates analyzing the mechanics of how healthy, joy-boosting habits are formed, there is immense value in understanding this routine.
It is fundamentally about slowing down, observing the world, and connecting with the life around you.
This raises an important question, though, and I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over.
Let's hear it.
We spent some time analyzing Bruno the Bulldog and Daisy the Beagle. We explored how they transitioned from being anxious and reactive to becoming best friends simply through consistent, low-pressure proximity.
Right, they just existed near each other.
They just showed up at the same time, shared the same physical space without demanding any immediate interaction from one another, and eventually a deep, transformative bond formed. That simple, predictable rhythm completely rewired Bruno's social neurobiology.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
So what if we applied this exact same dog logic to our own human interactions? Could we actively dismantle our own modern adult loneliness, not by forcing ourselves into high-pressure networking events or demanding immediate social intimacy, but simply by committing to be consistently present in our shared spaces?
Wow.
What if we just offered a simple smile, shared the environment without expectation, and allowed human trust to build naturally at a slow, comfortable walking pace?
Applying dog logic to cure human loneliness. Just showing up consistently, removing the pressure, and letting the bond form at its own natural pace. That is a truly profound framework to take away from this material.
It really makes you rethink how we connect.
For you listening, we invite you to put this into practice. Take your own screen-free walk today, whether you have a dog leading the way or not. Step outside, slow your pace, and observe the hidden social magic waiting right there in your own neighborhood. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, and we'll see you next time.